it's Brittany, and I'm back with another installment of Makeup and Murder. Now today we'll be talking about the Night Stalker, otherwise known as Richard Ramirez. Now, if you're already subscribed to my channel, welcome back, welcome back. If you are new and just finding my channel, make sure that you subscribe to my channel. Make sure that you like the video. It's greatly appreciated. And also make sure that you hit that notification bell so that you get notified each time makeup and murder videos come out, along with all of my other content as well. So let's get right into this week's video. Now, first, before I start makeup application, I am always going to add a moisturizer. I've cleansed my skin and I'm going to add a moisturizer, and I'm using the Saturday Skin Waterfall Glacier Water Cream. And I really love applying this under my makeup because it has a gel-like consistency. It doesn't leave any oil on my skin, and it just makes for a smoother makeup application. This is what the texture looks like. And today I'll actually be doing a retest of Fenty's new Soft Matte Pro Filter Powder Foundation. I recently did a video trying it out, and I feel like the color combination that I used, mostly the brightening shade of the foundation that I used, it was too orange looking on my skin. So I'm going to retry it this time using 480, which matches the darker areas of my face, and 460, which should have a different undertone compared to 450, which is what I used before. But I'll try again to do a full face of Fenty while we're going through this crazy story, y'all. This story is bananas. I'm also starting with Fenty's True Matte Pro Filter Primer. This does a really great job of keeping oil at bay for my skin, at least. And now on to the story and the eyebrows. Now, Richard Ramirez, born Richard Lavia Munoz Ramirez, was born on February 28th, 1960. And he was actually born, crazy enough, to a mother. Her name was Mercedes, and his father was a police officer. So his background is just crazy when you think about it compared to all the things that he will have done by the end of his life. So for those of you who don't know, Richard Ramirez is the Night Stalker. He was convicted of 43 crimes, 13 murders, and this is all at once, and this is over a very short span of time. And the 13 murders is just not everything that he did. That's just what they charged him with. They found out about a ton of other murders that he committed after he was already convicted, and DNA processing and testing had progressed, and technology got better, and they actually were able to tie more crimes and more murders to him after the conviction. But he's really known for this relatively short period of time where he just went on like a crime and killing spree, y'all. It was crazy. For those of you who are not aware, if you are triggered by things like rape, assault, those types of things, this story and this case is not for you, because, child, he did it all. Now, while Richard's father was a police officer, he was also very abusive. So Richard, being a very quiet kid when he was young, he would run away from his father and he would go hide and hang out in cemeteries. So that was his thing, you know, to each their own. But he was also bullied as a child because he was so quiet. They said he was quiet, he had long hair. I think they said he was husky at a certain point. So he was definitely bullied as a kid. And you know, you always got to watch out for those quiet ones. Those quiet ones, those be the crazy ones. So while he was about 12 or 13 years old, his cousin by the name of Mike, he was a Vietnam veteran. He had come home from Vietnam. So Richard started hanging around his cousin, and his cousin had brought home all these pictures of the people that he had killed over in Vietnam, the women that he had mutilated, raped, assaulted, and he kept these pictures as trophies, and he brought these home and he showed them to his 12-year-old cousin. So this is kind of where all of the background of him raping and mutilating and assaulting women. This is where this all kind of stems from, being exposed to this at such an early age. He also witnessed his cousin Miguel murder his wife right in front of him. Miguel, or Michael, he shot his wife right in front of Richard. Just shot his wife. Now, something else also to note about his childhood is when he was 2 years old, and this is going back just a little bit, but it's very important. When he was 2 years old, he had an accident where he was like climbing on a dresser or doing something in his room, and the dresser fell and hit him in the head, causing, a major injury, concussion to his head. And they do say, and there's science behind it, that, serial killers, typically, if you look at their background, a serial killer will have had some type of head injury or multiple head injuries leading up to the point where they start to kill or become criminals. So Richard became a high school dropout. He didn't like school. He was being bullied all the time. He'd rather, do other things. He became a high school dropout, and he actually moved from Texas, where he was born, and he moved to Southern California at the age of 15. Now, being a high school dropout, he didn't have money. He didn't have anything to, buy real food or healthy food with, and maybe he just chose not to, even if he did. But he tended to eat just candy and just straight sugar. He was on a sugar diet. So he ended up with halitosis and extremely rotten teeth. And this will come back to be something that identifies him and becomes like a trademark for the Night Stalker. Around this time, in his teenage years, he also started to commit crimes, petty crimes like, petty theft, burglary, possession of things like marijuana. So this is where his kind of crime record, crime sheet starts here as well. And it's always kind of the same process with serial killers that we find, is they start with small crimes and it continues to build up and build up until they finally get to the point where they're killing and they're, assaulting people. Now, it's weird because Richard Ramirez also came from a very religious family, and he himself was religious and believed in God up until about the time he was 18 years old. This is when he started to, proclaim that he was a satanic worshiper and he was a believer of Satan. This is where all the satanic stuff kind of comes in, and he's known for, the pentagrams and things like that, especially throughout his trial period. So this is where all of this starts at around the age of 18. And I'm just using precisely my brow pencil by Benefit Cosmetics to fill in and shape my eyebrows. And now I'm gonna go in with my Fenty Beauty, this is their Pro Filter Concealer in 450, and I'm going to use that to shape up my brows. And then I'll also use this a little bit later to do some color correcting under the powder foundation. Now that we know a little bit of background about Richard Ramirez and, how this person is kind of built up to the man he becomes, let's jump right into his actual crimes. And he has a lot of crimes. There is a lot of crimes. I am not going through all 43, but I did want to make sure to say the names at the very least of his murder victims, so that while we can't tell, every little detail about it, at least saying the name of those victims will do them and their families some justice. His first victim was Jenny Venkow, and this took place in 1984, in June of 1984. And she had opened a window because it was a really hot day, and she opened a window to get some air, to get a nice breeze in, and that was unfortunately her undoing. So after she opened this window, this is the entry point that Richard used to get in to her home. He came into her open window and he stabbed her to death. Now this is a, poor, frail, 79-year-old woman who, presents no threat to him whatsoever. So if he wanted to burglarize her home, he could have taken whatever he wanted. But he made it a point to stab her to death, and then he cut her throat after that. And after she was dead, he proceeded to rape her. The man was nuts. He was crazy from the very beginning. Like it doesn't get better as the story goes on. So unfortunately, once he does this and he leaves her, her son finds her dead shortly after in her home. So next, in March 17th of 1985, so he gave himself a little break. He, one night is just randomly driving around. He's high on cocaine because he does those things. He's a drug user and a heavy drinker by this point. But he's high on cocaine, he's driving around, he has a gun, and he just, feels like getting into something tonight. So he decides to pick a car completely at random and decides he's gonna follow it and wreak havoc on whoever is driving. And unfortunately, that person that was driving was Maria Hernandez. And Maria Hernandez, she pretty much was not aware that she was being followed until she got, kind of close to home. So she got home, she opened up her garage door and she closed it really quickly, thinking that, I'm home, I'm safe, I've closed the garage door, nobody can get in if they were trying to follow me and do anything to me. But unfortunately, she didn't realize that before she had closed her garage door, Richard had slipped under the door. And now I'm gonna use my Wander Beauty brow gel to just put my brows into place and hold them there. So once Richard Ramirez was in the garage with Maria Hernandez, he actually shot at her. And as he shot at her, she kind of put her hands up to kind of block herself. And she had keys in her hand, and thank God the bullet actually hit the keys and missed her, but she still fell to the ground and played dead, as she should have. And he kind of just assumed that she was dead and walked on past her and went into the apartment to see if there was anybody else inside. And unfortunately, there was. And now I'm going to use the Fenty Beauty Pro Filter Amplifying Eye Primer. So the person that was inside when Richard Ramirez went inside the apartment was Maria Hernandez's roommate, and her name was Dale Okazaki. And as Richard went in, he knew that she was like hiding after she heard the commotion in the garage. She was hiding, kind of squatting down, hiding behind the counter in the kitchen. So he just kind of played the waiting game and waited for her curiosity, to get the best of her, because, curiosity killed the cat, no pun intended. But she eventually poked her head up to see, what was going on, if he was still in the apartment. And as soon as she did that, he shot her right in the head. So after that happened, he went back out, and they say that, I guess I saw a couple of reports, but one report said that he went back through the garage and he noticed that Maria was still alive, but he just kept walking past. And I don't know if it was like an urgency kind of thing. He wanted to hurry up and get out of there. And I saw another report that said he kind of walked through the front door and Maria had gotten up and run out of the garage to try to go get help somewhere in the building. And he ran across her at the front of the apartment building. And somehow he just still let her live. But either way, she lived. He didn't kill her, thank God. But just an hour later, he was right back on the prowl, y'all. Right back out there looking for somebody else to terrorize. So he's on the prowl, driving around looking for somebody else to follow, and he starts to follow Veronica Yu. But y'all, sis was not having it. She was not about that being followed. She definitely was ready to confront whoever it was that was following her. So I saw, again, multiple reports tell the story differently. One report says that she pulled over to let him pass, And then after she pulled over to let him pass, she started like telling him. But either way, she pulled over and she started questioning him. She was yelling at him, saying, you know, why are you following me? And he tried to say, oh, well, I thought I knew you. That's why I was following you. And she's like, no, you didn't. You didn't think you knew me. Not at all. So once this confrontation happened, basically what he does is he tries to get either into her car or get her out of her car to try to assault her. He ends up shooting her in her back and leaving her there for dead. So not even, 2 weeks later, 10 days later, he breaks into the house of Vincent and Maxine Zazzara. And this is where he starts to kind of establish his pattern about what he does with the male versus what he does with the female. So upon entering their house, he basically finds Vince on the couch sleeping, and he shoots him in the head and pretty much gets rid of that threat immediately. So then once he does that, he proceeds to find Maxine, and he takes her, he gags her, and he ties her up. And she manages to get free of the restraints that he put on her. And when she does that, she's able to get their shotgun that they keep in their room. So she gets the shotgun. He comes back in the room from doing whatever it was he was doing. And he sees her with the shotgun and she pulls the trigger. But unfortunately, and that's like the worst thing that could ever possibly happen. You think you're safe, you think you got something to protect yourself, and the gun was empty. So apparently, recently their grandchildren had come to visit, so her husband Vince had taken all of the shells out of the shotgun. So when she went to pull the trigger, it just clicked. And of course that made him extremely angry. So, and please, apologies for all of these details, but I have to tell the story. He ends up shooting her 3 times, but unfortunately that is not all that he did. But this is how demented he was. He was so angry with her that she would try to defend herself against him, that he tries to literally cut her heart out after he shot her 3 times. He tries his damnedest to cut her heart out, but he just cannot get through that breastbone. He could not cut through the breastbone. So that made him mad, on top of her shooting a gun at him. So because he can't get to her heart, he decides he's just gonna cut her eyes out. So he literally cuts this woman's eyes out. Like, it doesn't get any more demented than this. This is probably one of the craziest stories that I've heard throughout all of the stories that I've heard in true crime and things that I've read and things that I've watched. Like, by far, he's one of the most demented and crazy people I've ever come across. Once he leaves, after he's done all of this to these poor people who were just minding their business and enjoying a night, he leaves, but thank God this is where we find some evidence for the first time. So he leaves a shoe print, and it's specifically an Avia shoe print. And at this time, not a lot of people in the area are buying Avia shoes. I think they said only 6 pair were sold in that area at that time of these Avia shoes. So this is where we get our first piece of real evidence to help figure out who is attacking these innocent people. But of course, it's still too soon to kind of tie the events together. Of course, a lot of different things and murders are happening in succession in a very small amount of time, but they're so random, from somebody being followed home driving to somebody being attacked while driving to now somebody's home being broken into and a couple being murdered. Completely different crimes. So the police were not yet tying these things together to deem this being an act of a serial killer. So now, about a month and a half later, this is May 14th, Richard breaks into the home of William or Bill and Lily Doy. And same MO, he breaks in, immediately shoots the husband in the head and, gets that threat out of the way. And then he proceeds to place, and I've never heard of these, but he proceeds to place thumb cuffs on Lily. I don't know where he got them from. I don't know if that was all he had at the time. Like, I don't know where those came from. But he puts thumb cuffs on Lily and he proceeds to, of course, beat her and rape her. But thank God Lily does survive. And I am using the Jackie Aina palette for my eye look today. Now, just a few days later, on May 29th, Richard Ramirez breaks into the home of sisters Mabel Ma Bell and Florence Lang. Now, Florence Lang is a disabled person and living with her sister, who was pretty much her caregiver as well. And he goes in their home and he finds a hammer and he proceeds to beat them both with the hammer. So he raped Florence and then he tried to rape Mabel, but he was not able to perform. So he electrocuted her and tortured her. And both of them were left for dead and they weren't found for 3 days. And they both were still alive when they were found. But Florence lived, but unfortunately, Mabel passed away. Now, y'all, he was just like on a roll at this point because the very next day, he attacks Carol Kyle. And he woke this poor woman up in the middle of the night with a flashlight, shining a flashlight in her face. And he then proceeded to grab her son, who was present at the time of the attack, and put a gun to his head and told her, "Don't make a sound or I'll shoot your son in the head." So after he does this, he takes the son and puts him in a closet and handcuffs him so that he can continue his attack. So he comes back and he then rapes her and sodomizes her, but then leaves. So this is another victim that actually does live. So about a month later after this attack, he just ramps things up to like the 20,000th power, and he's just going and going and going. This is gonna be like back to back to back to back attacks. On June 27th, he raped a 6-year-old girl, and the very next day he attacks Patty Higgins, and he actually beat her and then slit her throat. On July 2nd, a couple of days later, he also attacks a woman named Mary Louise Cannon, and he did the same thing that he did to Miss Higgins. He beat her and then he slit her throat. But at this scene, again, he left his signature Avia shoe print. Now I am going to be applying my handy dandy magnetic lashes. I don't know where I would be in life without these. This is just magnetic liner, and you just literally snap them on once the liner dries, and that's it. But then just 3 days later, on July 5th, he attacks a 16-year-old girl named Whitney Bennett. Now, he beat her with a tire iron and then proceeded to try to choke her with a telephone cord and thought she was dead. But then all of a sudden, the telephone cord started to spark and there were sparks flying everywhere, and he saw that she started breathing again, and he thought that, oh Jesus, it was the sign of God. He was coming to get me. My nemesis is coming to get me. Something ain't right. So he freaked out and he left. But again, he left that same Avia shoe print at the scene. But thank God, another survivor we have. Now on July 7th, just 2 days later, he committed 2 different attacks on the same day. So like I said, he is just getting out of control. Like he can't help himself. So he attacks a woman named Joyce Lucille Nelson, and he beat her to death. And then again, like a dum-dum, left the same Avia shoe print at the scene. Now, again, if we had police who just worked together instead of were so concerned about getting the credit for closing a case, we would see that there's like 4 or 5 cases now where we have the same Avia shoe print at the scene, but nobody knows. Nobody knows, and not even the county police know, because these smaller precincts are not saying anything. I feel like in every case that we talk about, there's always a way that if not one of the killings could have been avoided, at least all of the killings or crimes that followed could have been avoided in a way, whether it had been the justice system doing the right thing, or police officers doing the right thing, or paying attention and actually doing their job and working collaboratively to solve cases. I feel like a lot of these murders and a lot of these assaults and a lot of these crimes would have never happened had they actually all been doing their job and working together as you would expect. Now, on that very same night, he broke into the home of Sophie Dickman. She was a psychiatric nurse. So, you know, she dealt with crazy people and psychopaths like him for a living. And he broke in, he tried to assault her, sexually assault her as well, but again, he just couldn't perform. So he ended up not killing her. She kind of knew how to talk to him, or his type of people. And he ended up not killing her, but he wanted to take everything that she had of value. So she was trying to like gather all the things that she was gonna give him for him to take. And she tried to like hide a diamond ring, and he caught her. So when he caught her, he punched her in the face. And then he left after taking all of her valuables. And again, she lived, and she was able to give a really good description of Richard Ramirez, a much better description than what, you know, some of the other people who survived had been able to give. So I'm just gonna pop on these magnetic lashes, and then I'm just gonna take a little bit of my Kush mascara from Milk Makeup. Now I'm just gonna take a little bit of this Fenty concealer again and do a little bit of color correcting. So just a few days later, after he attacked Sophie Dickman, he was pulled over by a police officer, and the police officer had recognized him once he pulled him over and had him get out of the car, put his hands on the vehicle, you know, how they usually ask you when they're about to arrest you. And the police officer had stepped away and gone to his car for a moment. Richard ends up taking off and getting away from the police officer. Now, before he does that, he takes his finger and he draws a pentagram on the actual police car, and he runs. So we have a police officer who pulled him over, pretty much suspected that it was him, and let the man get away. But that's not the worst of it. He takes his car and returns it back to, you know, the precinct, and he goes on vacation. So they couldn't even process the fingerprints that were left on the car by Richard Ramirez until this man got off of vacation. So by the time he comes back from vacation, the car has been sitting outside the entire time. So any fingerprints or evidence that was left on the car all just vanished. So here we are again in an instant where some good police work could have really been used, because he could have been caught there and could have been done. But here I am still with half a story to tell because he got away. Okay, so I've done the color correcting. Now I'm just gonna take a little bit of my Laura Mercier Translucent Deep setting powder, and I'm going to set the liquid concealer that I just applied, because everything else that I'm gonna be using after this is going to be a powder product. So now we're at July 20th, and this is when Richard breaks into the home of Chainarong and some kid Covenant. And apologies if I butchered that name, y'all. I've heard it said a number of different ways. I'm just trying to tell the story. But he does his usual, where as soon as he breaks in, he attacks the male and he shoots and he kills Chainarong. And he then forces some kid to perform oral sex on him, which is yuck. And he then also beats her. So now at this point, this is finally when the police in all these different areas are saying, okay, we have a pattern here. We have a person who's breaking into a home where there's a couple present. He's killing the husband first, or the male in the home first, and then he's raping or sodomizing the woman and then beating her, and likely beating her to death. They finally get it. They're finally working together at this point. So now I'm going to take the Fenty Pro Filt'r Soft Matte Powder Foundation in 480. And I'm going to use that all around the darker areas of my face. I'm going to use my Sigma round kabuki brush. So then, once that attack takes place, he takes a small break. I feel like he was a little bit, due for a break. He needed to recuperate after all of the events that took place in that such a short period of time. But he breaks into another home. This time it's the home of Chris and Virginia Peterson. And he does the same thing. He shot the male in the head first, and then he went and attacked Mr. Peterson's wife, Virginia. But as he was attacking Virginia, who was also shot, Chris came to her defense and was about that life, and he fought Richard Ramirez off. And when Chris came to defend his wife, Richard was not, that's not what he was there for. So he got up out of that jam. So he escaped, and thankfully, they both survived. Now I'm only putting the color that is closest to my skin tone around the perimeter of my face. That's where the darker areas are in my face. So that's where I'm putting this color, and then I'm taking the lighter color and I'm going to use that as a brightener or in the center, towards the center of my face. Now, 2 days later, he breaks into the home of Elias and Sakina Abawath and pulls the same stunt. He breaks in, he shoots the husband in the head first, and then he sexually assaulted Sakina. And unfortunately, when this happens, their son is also in the home. So the son, who was 3 years old at the time, thank God he was smart enough to go get help. So he ran to the neighbors and got help for his family. Now, on August 18th in San Francisco, he breaks into the home of Peter and Barbara Pan. And really quick, I'm taking my 460 shade of the Pro Filt'r Powder Foundation, and I'm using it as a concealer or like a brightener in the middle of my face. So he breaks into the home and he shoots the husband first. He also shoots the wife, Barbara, but thank goodness she survives. But what he does is just disgusting. He goes in their kitchen, he eats their food. He then proceeds to throw their food up in the middle of their living room on the carpet. And then again, he's drawing pentagrams in lipstick. Some say he was drawing pentagrams in blood. He's just demented. But this is where we have, again, people in offices and important jobs that don't know what the hell they're doing, and they're actually hindering the solving of cases. So when this takes place in San Francisco, Miss Mayor of San Francisco decides she ain't having this. She is not having this happening in her city. No way. So she proceeds to get herself, you know, a little bit of airtime and goes on television and pretty much broadcasts all of the classified information that they have so far on Richard Ramirez. She tells them that, you know, this is the type of gun that he's using. You know, he's leaving Avia shoe prints all over the place. Just all the information. She's telling them he has, you know, he's been reported to have bad breath and et cetera, et cetera. Just all the tea. She's spilling all the tea to everybody. And that does nothing but shit on the police's case. We finally got the police working together. We finally got them trying to solve the case and putting their brains together to figure some things out. And as soon as they start to get it together, we got Miss Mayor that's spilling all the tea. So what does Richard Ramirez do? What do you think he does? He takes himself on the Golden Gate Bridge and he tosses those shoes, honey. He tosses the gun. So none of that stuff is ever found, ever. Thank you, Miss Mayor, thank you. So now I'm going to try to use these two shades to kind of create some type of contour to my nose. I don't do a whole lot of contour, so when I see a little bit of shape in there, I'm good. I don't need plastic surgery contour nose. Like that's not what I'm looking for. I'm Black, I'm melanated, I like my wide nose, so I just want it to be cute. So the last murder that we knew of at the time took place on August 24th. That is when he broke into the home of Bill Carnes and his fiance, Inez Erickson. And this is where he gets cocky. Like, he feels like, okay, I have secured myself. I got rid of every piece of evidence that I know that they have on me, so I can do whatever I want. So what he does is he, again, shoots the husband in the head, and then he proceeds to rape the wife, or the fiance at the time. He raped her, and then he forced her to have oral sex with him. And then on top of that, he says, you know, tell the police that the Night Stalker did this to you. Like, tell them I was here. Tell them to come find me. And it's like, so you know the police just ain't shit in your area, huh? So she actually reports it. She survives, and she actually sees the car that he's driving. So he's identified as driving a orange Toyota, and she's able to provide that information to the police. Okay, so I'm going to deepen up my sides a little bit with a little bit of the Fenty Skin Sticks, and this is in Caviar. So now let's talk about his capture. This by far is the best capture story I have heard, y'all. Just wait. So first we find out that one other crime that he had committed was breaking into the home of Jack Soroya. And when he does this, he steals a bracelet. And the bracelet that he stole, unfortunately, was a Social Security bracelet for Jack Soroya. And when he steals this bracelet, he goes, of course, to try to sell it for money because he's a drug addict, he's an alcoholic, he needs money, and he ain't working because he's too busy committing murders. So he goes to sell it, and he sells it to his best friend at the time, and his best friend ends up spilling all his tea, just spilling all the tea. So the police talk to an informant that say, yeah, I know who that Richard person is, and I know his best friend. And they find best friend, and best friend's like, yeah, his name is Richard Ramirez. That's his full name. Y'all looking for him? There you go. After that happens, we know that one of the victims was able to identify the car that he was driving. We also find out that a neighbor of Bill Carnes and Inez Erickson, the son, was home at the time where Richard Ramirez was actually trying to break into their house first, but he got scared off. So the son was looking out the window at the time and he saw the Toyota as well, the vehicle as well. So he reported that to the police as well. So we have two sightings of the vehicle. We know this man's name, we know his government, we know what car he's riding around in. So the police are getting closer to catching him. So this time I'm going to try a different bronzer. This is the Revolution Glow matte bronzer. I tried the Fenty bronzer the last time and I think that did nothing but like contribute to the orange red look on my face, and I wasn't really feeling that. So I'm gonna try a more kind of muted neutral color bronzer, cool bronzer should I say, and see if that does a better job with kind of evening out the color on my face. So Ramirez decides that I need to get away. I'm gonna go hop on a bus and visit my brother. So he tries to visit his brother, but that falls through. So he hops on another bus and he gets off the bus and he sees that the police are waiting for him. So before the police can see him get off the bus and see where he goes, he hops on another bus, y'all. He is running at this point. So when he takes another bus, he gets off. When he gets off, he's in the hood. So he is starting to be recognized and they're all yelling El Matador. They're calling him El Matador. They're yelling, they know who he is. Everybody can identify him now. Everybody knows who Richard Ramirez is. You wanted them to know that you were the Night Stalker. Now, here it is. They know. And they bring in their friends. So he's running, he's trying to steal cars. Every time he tries to steal a car, y'all, he gets his ass whooped, basically. So he's trying to steal cars from women, and women are not alone in this neighborhood, and they mans don't play. So he tries to steal a car, I think at least 3 times. 3 times he tries to steal a car, y'all. And all 3 times he got chased off or damn near got his ass whooped. And the last time he did get his ass whooped, homie took a pipe off of his gate. Off his gate, y'all. Took a pipe off of his gate and whooped his ass. And he knocked him down. And when I say the whole neighborhood joined in, baby, they were not playing. The whole neighborhood joined in. They whooped his ass. Like to the point where the police were the saviors for Richard Ramirez. He was happy to see the police. So the police come save him and they take him into custody. Now Richard Ramirez is in jail and awaiting trial. When I say that's the best capture I've ever heard in my life, I wish every capture could play out like that, because you want your community to get a little bit of get back before he just gets to go to jail and sit and eat government food and sleep in a government house building for the rest of his life. So now I'm going to take some NYX Sweet Cheeks matte blush, and this time is going to be in the color Summer Breeze. It's a little more pink than the one I used for the last try of this foundation. So now let's talk about the trial itself. So of course, during the entire trial, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, he wanted to be portrayed as this, evil satanic worshiper, which he was. He was pure evil, but that's what he wanted to be portrayed as. So he was defiant for the entire process. He was adamant that they hired these 2 Latino attorneys, and they were 2 attorneys that they were new to the game. They were inexperienced, didn't know what they were doing, especially for such a high profile case. But he would do things like draw pentagrams on his hands and then hold them up for the cameras. He would just do all type of shit in the courtroom that was just unnecessary. And like I said, those defense attorneys, like the prosecution knew that they were so unprepared and so inexperienced that the prosecution was doing everything to help the defense, because they didn't want anybody to come back and say, oh, I had, inadequate counsel or anything like that to have, to mess up this case. This case was so big, they didn't want anything to happen to mess it up. So they were helping the defense, like, you should probably ask this question. You should probably look into this. Here, we got this evidence. You probably want to take a look at it real close. So now I'm going to take my Fenty highlighter, and this is Penny for You Thoughts. So this trial, I believe the trial lasted for a full year, and there was over 500 pieces of evidence, and there was 167 witnesses. But I mean, it was just a horrible trial. Like, these lawyers were like dumb. Like, they were asking dumb questions. One point, like, the defense attorney got tired of his case pretty much and asked the judge if they could have a break from the case, and proceeded to tell the judge, like, can you please call my doctor? He'll tell you that I need a break. I'm really like, are you serious? Do you know what you signed up for? That trial was a hot mess. But finally, in September of 1989, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, was found guilty, and he was sentenced to death. But y'all know that didn't stop. Like, every serial killer has, groupies. Every one of them has groupies, no matter how crazy they are, no matter how crazy they look, no matter what they did. Every serial killer has groupies. And even a juror was like enamored with Richard Ramirez. She ended up like being a private investigator for one of his appeals after he was convicted. But it's just crazy. He ends up getting married while he's in jail. Like, these women are just nuts. Like, everybody has their quirks and everybody has their thing, but sis, really? But I'm just happy that he got convicted and he was sentenced to death, because the trial, almost went awry because one of the jurors ended up being murdered during the trial, and everybody was so afraid that Richard Ramirez had something to do with her murder. But come to find out, it was a murder-suicide. And I mean, that doesn't make it any better. It's very unfortunate, but it was a murder-suicide where the juror's boyfriend had killed her and then killed himself. So the trial was able to go on, and he was able to be, convicted and sentenced to death. So I'm gonna try to make Honey Waffles work one more time before I send her back. If you watched my swatching video for the Fenty Gloss Bomb creams, this was not my favorite. It just looked too orange, and it doesn't even really look orange in the tube, but it's really orange on me. I'm gonna try one more time to make it work. So I'm going to use my liner first, and this is my dark brown NYX liner, and this is in Club Hopper. And I'm going to see if this does better one more time, y'all. So after he is convicted and he's in prison and DNA analysis has improved, there's a couple other cases that were notably linked to the Night Stalker. And one of them was the attack of Theodore Wildings and Nancy Bryan. And it was the same MO. He shot Theodore in the head, and then he brutally raped Nancy. And the other crime was, unfortunately, a crime on a minor, another crime on a minor. So he had no type, no age. He didn't care. But this was a 9-year-old girl, named May. She lived in the same apartment building or hotel that he was living in at the time. And he took her down in the basement and he beat her, he raped her, and then he stabbed her to death. But that wasn't all. He took her body and he hung her on one of the pipes in the basement. There's no one worse. There is no man worse than he so far that I have come across. So this is what Honey Waffles looks like with a lip liner. So it's a little bit better. I'm gonna put on one layer. It looks better. It looks a lot less orange. Maybe it was just, you know, the orange radiating from my face in the last video. But it's still not wowing me. Like, it's not giving me anything special. I think I'm gonna throw on a fruit snacks with this just because it'll look better with my eye look. So after these cases were linked, I'm sure that brought a lot of closure to the family. So we're grateful for that. But unfortunately, he did not, you know, meet his fate that he should have. And he died from cancer in prison. And that was in 2013. All right, y'all. So that is the story of Richard Ramirez, or the Night Stalker. And this is also the final look. I like this much better. I like that it's less orange. It looks much more true to my skin tone. I think that it looks really good. It's doing a good job at managing oiliness. But yeah, I think this looks really good, much better. I think I may have found my combination. I like the brightening in just the eye area and on my chin. And I think that it just looks really good together. It mixes well, it covers really well, and you can build it up to more coverage if you like. I like it. I like the way that it applies. What did you guys think of Richard Ramirez? I feel like he's the craziest person that I've ever heard of. If you hear the interviews that they have available, he just sounds nuts. He sounds crazy. And there's really no rhyme or reason to who he picked, why he picked them. There's no pattern. There's no age group. There's no look he was going for, like no gender specific. It's just all whatever he felt like doing at that time. So for me, that's like the worst type of serial killer. Like, there's nothing that you can look out for. There's nothing that you can protect yourself from because it's just random. So I hope you guys enjoyed this story in this video. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the Richard Ramirez story or the Night Stalker. Let me know what you think of the look today. And always make sure that you like the video. It means so much to me when you do that. And also make sure you subscribe if you have not already. I would love for you to stick around and enjoy all the other things that I have in store for you guys. Make sure you hit that notification bell so that you get notified whenever I post new content as well. But other than that, love you guys. Bye.